Hi there, and welcome to the video tutorial for our Sparkle Cake shawl. This is a crochet triangle shawl that's a free pattern on my blog, which is linked in the description box below. Going ahead and getting started, you're going to need 2 cakes of this Lion Brand Mandala Sparkle yarn. You can use any cake yarn that's a category 3 weight, that's a lightweight yarn. This is the colorway Nova, which I really like because it has really soft color changes. You're going to need a crochet hook as well. I'm using a J or 10 6mm hook. And this is just a really easy pattern. We're going to make basically 2 rows and then we're going to repeat that second row over and over again. So just go ahead and find the end of your yarn. We're going to make a slip knot. Insert your hook into the slip knot, tighten it down, and then we're going to go ahead and chain 4. This is a very beginner friendly pattern, but if you need help with these basic stitches, just look them up on YouTube. So we have 4 chain stitches. We're going to slip stitch into the very first chain we made next to the slip knot. And we're going to slip stitch that together to form a ring. Okay, so we chained 4 and then we slip stitch to the very first stitch. This should create a little loop, a little ring of 4 chain stitches. Now we're going to go ahead and chain 2 again. This is starting row 1. So row 1 begins with a chain 2. Now we're going to work into the center of the ring itself, double crochet. We're not working into one of those chain stitches here, we're working into the middle of that ring we created. So we made 1 double crochet. We're going to go ahead and double crochet again. So there's our second double crochet. Now we're going to chain 2. This is going to create that center point to our triangle shawl. So chain 1 and then 2. Now working back down into that ring at the middle, we're going to work 3 double crochets now. So here's the first one. Our second double crochet. I should mention as well that that starting chain, that chain 2 that was at the beginning of row 1, does count as a stitch throughout the pattern. Okay, so there we have 3 double crochets. So now if we look at this, this is a chain 2, which counts as a stitch, then 2 double crochets, a chain 2, and then 3 double crochets. And you can see it kind of looks like a teeny tiny triangle. Starting row 2, we're going to chain 2 once again. We're going to turn our work. Make sure you get that tail out of the way. Now into this very first stitch right here next to the chain 2, we're going to work 2 double crochets because again, we are increasing here, but we want that chain 2 to start, that starts out the row to count as a stitch. So really if you're counting that, it's 3 stitches into the very first spot, our chain 2 and then 2 double crochets into that same stitch. Okay, so you can see that there. We're going to double crochet into each of the following 2 stitches or until you reach that chain 2 space. So this row, row 2, is the one that we're going to be repeating to carry out the rest of the shawl. So as you move on, you're just going to be double crocheting until you meet that chain 2 space. So here we are at the chain 2 space at the tip of the triangle shape. Now into that space, we're going to work a double crochet and then a chain 2 once again to again just create that point, another double crochet into the chain 2 space. And then we're going to move on down the other side. So you see that's a double crochet, a chain 2, and another double crochet all into that chain 2 space. Working into the next double crochet, we're going to work 1 double crochet into each stitch until you get to the end. Double crochet in the next spot. And then in the last stitch, we're going to work 3 double crochets. Now the last stitch, again, because our chain 2 counts as a stitch in this pattern, you're actually going to be working into the top of that chain 2 from row 1. That's where you're going to make your 3 double crochets. So that's 1, 2, and 3. And this is even and symmetrical. You should have the same number of stitches on each side. You should have 6 double crochets or stitches that count as double crochets if you're counting that chain 2 on either side of your chain 2 at the point of your triangle. And then you're going to chain 2 and turn and get ready to go again. So now we're just going to repeat row 2, which means we're going to work 2 double crochets in the first stitch. That chain 2 counts as a stitch, so really we have 3 stitches right now. chain 2, 2 double crochets. Now we're going to just double crochet all the way down till we get to our chain 2 space. You don't have to count this. In order to stay consistent, especially if you're a beginner and you want to make sure that your shawl stays symmetrical, you can count as you go down one side and then count back up the other side, and you should have the same number of stitches on either side of that chain 2 kind of peak of your triangle. But once you get going and you're just kind of watching Netflix and relaxing, making this triangle, scarf, shawl, wrap, whatever you want to call it, it definitely becomes very mindless. So once you get to that chain 2 space, we're going to do the same thing we did before. 1 double crochet, a chain 2. So we did 1. Here we do our chain 2, and then another double crochet right down into that chain space. Don't work into the next stitch yet. So there, that creates that point. We're just going to keep double crocheting all the way down. Especially during these first couple of rows, I do recommend counting your stitches on either side to make sure you're not like working into one of those chain 2 stitches at the point on accident or anything, or make sure you're getting that final set of 3 double crochets into the last stitch, that chain 2 from the row below. Make sure you're doing that right, just so that you don't mess something up now and then keep going with it and you don't realize until your shawl is almost finished. So it's definitely better to check now while it's really small, because you're going to be carrying out the exact same thing over and over again. So now you're just going to keep repeating row 2 until your shawl is 60 inches wide if you're measuring across the top. For me, that was a total of 40 rows with this yarn and hook combination. You can use any yarn weight with a corresponding hook size, and really you're going to be able to make a shawl just like this. You just need to make sure that you measure and stop when you get to 60 inches wide, unless you'd like a larger or smaller shawl. This is really customizable. If you want to use a different weight of yarn, a worsted, a bulky, even a like light fingering weight yarn, you can use really anything, and you can just use the hook size that's recommended with that yarn. I'm just going to keep going until my shawl is huge, and then I'm going to add tassels. If you look at the Sewrella YouTube channel, you can find a tassel video in which I make tassels to go with this shawl. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. See you later.